All right, let's bring you the latest in the world of business. The world market activity remains modest as investors weigh varied economic developments. Mixed performance is recorded in Asia, along with U.S. markets, as the Federal Reserve seems divided on the next interest rate move. Independent analyst Jimmy Moyaha joins us now. Very good morning to you. Thank you for your time. What are the driving factors expected in global markets today?
Morning, Paul. Morning to our viewers. As you rightly mentioned, there's a lot of concern around the lack of or the slowing down in Chinese demand. It seems to be drying up in certain areas. There's still some concerns around the recovery rate of the Chinese manufacturing space, but all eyes do appear to indeed be focused on the U.S. Fed. We know that for the longest time that they've had to adjust their rate curves and their rate hiking trajectories, and it looks as though we're now once again awaiting U.S. data to see what the U.S. Fed is going to do in terms of their policy stance. We know that we're expecting a couple of Fed governors to speak in this week. We know that today, I think it's tonight, the beige book would be put out from the U.S. side of it. So the data points that are coming out at this stage point towards the next moves or the next steps that the Fed might need to take in line with keeping inflation under control, in line with ensuring that the economy is not jeopardized and sent into a recession. And what that effect is having on the markets is that you're seeing that overnight U.S. markets were effectively flat. Asia markets in early trade were flat to weaker. Shanghai was down about 0.6%, and we've seen that follow through to the SA Top 40. Local side of things, we were down about 0.75% on the all share as well as on the Top 40. Resources were down about 1.4% in early trade. The expectation, of course, is that as we look ahead towards what the U.S. could potentially say, that emerging markets might sort of start to taper off and might have a bit of a pause in terms of the rally that we're seeing. We saw that yesterday markets locally performed really well, driven largely by the PGM counters, and we're expecting that follow through from that may still continue in the days and weeks to come. On the currency side of it, the rand is showing some signs of strength, holding at 18 rand 19 against the dollar, setting at about 22 rand 69 against the pound, and at about 19 rand 96 against the euro.
Let's expand on that and talk about the performance of the rand and emerging market currency peers. How is that faring?
So we have seen in recent times that the rand has shown signs of strength. It did initially struggle. I mean, we know that we have had a significant rate hike. We hiked our interest rates in our last cycle by 50 basis points or 0.5%, and we saw that that had somewhat of a positive effect on the rand, but that was short-lived, and we saw the rand come back above the 18 rand level. We've recently been as high as about 18 rand 32. We're struggling to maintain the momentum that we saw when we saw that rate hike dip below, or force the rand below 18 rand rather. And at this stage, all eyes, as I said, are on the U.S. Fed, and that will be a key indicator in terms of the U.S.'s positioning relative to South Africa's positioning and what we could potentially expect from our own central bank in terms of rate hikes. We know that the U.S. is probably going to hike the rates by another 25 basis points. We know that South Africa as well is potentially still in for another round of rate hikes. We're not at the end of that rate hiking cycle as yet. So at the moment, the rand is holding its ground as best it can, considering all the factors that are still in play and waiting for some greater indication in terms of directional movements.
Let's move to company news, starting with the trading update from the Raubex Group. What's entailed there?
Raubex is expected to give us their full set of statements, full set of financials rather, on the 15th of May, but they've given us early guidance in that trading statement saying that their earnings per share are going to be up anywhere between 20 and 30%. Headline earnings per share are going to be up anywhere between 25 and 35%. They're attributing a lot of this performance to a stronger year that they've had. They noted that some of their most notable projects were the completion of the White Bridge border post project that they had, and they also commented saying that they secured about 2 billion rands in new projects from Sunrail since October of 2022. So that's coupled with their performance in Australia. I mean, obviously the Australian division, they also alluded to the fact that that division contributed about 20% to the business's operating profit. So all in all, it looks like a good, strong set of numbers are going to be coming out from Raubex, which is very impressive considering the tough, turbulent time they've had during the COVID period. and of late, and it looks as though the strong performance is definitely something that the market is looking forward to. And as I said, we'll get those results out properly on the 15th of May.
And lastly, what's to be said about the censure of former Tongaat CFO Murray Munroe over irregularities at the now crippled sugar firm?
Well, it can't, it has to be said that this is potentially a censure that has been long overdue and much anticipated. We know that Mr. Munroe was implicated in the forensic report conducted in 2019 by PwC. We know that he was CFO of Tongaat throughout the period of the irregularities that have been brought to light. There's still obviously, if you remember, there was a civil claim against the directors to the tune of 450 million rand, and he was implicated in, or he was mentioned in one of those as well. With regards to the censure that was announced by the JSE, we know that following the announcement of that censure, it is a censure coupled with a 10-year ban on being a director of a publicly listed company, as well as a potential fine of 6 million rand. Mr. Munroe has appealed all of this. He's appealed the suspension. He's also appealed the fine, and the suspension was immediately overturned. And so that stands as we know it at this present moment, but the fine itself has been suspended pending the outcome of the appeal that he has lodged. He's within his rights as a former director to lodge such an appeal, and so the due process that needs to be followed there needs to carry itself out before we know whether or not he will be liable for that 6 million rand fine imposed by the JSE. But obviously a public censure of this nature is somewhat of a serious situation, and whether or not the fine goes ahead or whether or not the suspension is lifted in terms of his ability to serve on public entities, the censure in itself is a damning position from the JSE side of things, and it definitely is something that we could potentially see followed through if we haven't already seen some of the other directors that were implicated in the forensic report and in the Tongaat investigations.
Thank you very much. Let's leave it there for now. Independent analyst Jimmy Moyaha giving us a sense of how the very latest in the world of business is looking like, as well as a market update.